we just learned some really vital information about the fight for reproductive freedom. But we can't leave this room without talking about something that impacts most women. Periods. Yes, for some of us, let's go all the way back. Most of us remember like the first day we got our period, and I still remember even being in a home with 4 sisters, still not knowing exactly what to do and having so much stigma living inside of me. But so many other people have to worry about basic things, right? Like having pads and tampons, and that being the difference between going to school and going to work. Menstrual justice goes hand in hand with gender justice. Many of us may take for granted the fact that we can just open up a cabinet or run down to CVS and grab what we need when we need it. But an estimated 16.9 million menstruating women in the US live in poverty. 2/3 of women with low incomes and food insecurity are experiencing period poverty. That means they're unable to access basic menstrual products or the education that they need to know about their periods. Period poverty is obviously complicated because it is compounded by stigma. Like we don't have these conversations about our periods often, and if we do, we rarely do it very openly. So today, we're gonna break some period stigma. We're gonna talk about period poverty with some incredible people and organizations who are working to make a difference. So I am delighted to welcome the co-founder of August, Nadya Okamoto, and policymaker Cristina Garcia, who are 2 change makers fighting the good fight against period poverty. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nadya. Oh, you
Okay.
lost the pen.
Oh, yeah, actually. So Nadya, I would love to start with you. You are one of the leading activists around menstrual equity. You founded an organization called period.org, an organization that's aimed at ending period stigma. Can you talk a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, I mean, so this is my 10-year work anniversary. I started a nonprofit when I was 16 in 2014 called Period, led it as executive director for 6 years, and then wrote a book called Period Power that came out in 2018. And now I run August, which is a Better for You, Better for Planet period care brand. And I would say that I've always been super honestly angered by the issue of period poverty. I think it's a constant privilege check for me, just realizing the fact that period access and access to period products has not been something I currently struggle with, but also that we live in a country where we're still dealing with things like the tampon tax, right, which is a sales tax on period products, considering them non-essential goods. But I think that that's one area where we can celebrate progress, because the last time I was on the Makers stage in 2019, the tampon tax was in 35 states, and now we're in 20 states. So we're making progress, but we have 20 states to go.
That's amazing. I mean, you started what is called like a menstrual movement, right? And so the work of August is, how is August structured and how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I definitely did not start the menstrual movement. I might have given it a fun little nickname. But you know, I think that just for me, I never expected I would run like a venture-backed period care brand, but I think that throughout my career, I honestly felt really affected by the symptoms of the nonprofit industrial complex, of feeling like I wanted to change the system. I tried doing it from the nonprofit angle. I ran for office when I was 19 years old, didn't win, but we made history with student turnout. And so I feel like I tried doing public policy. And actually at each realm of my career, I kept feeling like, well, I'm just raising money to try to do the actual work. What does it actually look like to own a lot of the authority to be able to build something that can have lasting impact? I was also working in the space where I was distributing millions of period care, getting to know a lot about the products and realizing that there was such a gap for innovating on sustainability with period care. And I really wanted to also see the period world change the way we talk about periods, right? When I was writing my book, I was trying to answer the question, why is period stigma so negative? And the conclusion I came to was really around that capitalism in the industry is very responsible for it in many ways. For the last century, we've been sold this narrative that you buy the product to hide your period, to forget you have a period. All you have to do is slip in a little tampon, then you can wear the white dress and go play tennis and go on a hot date. And I felt like in a consumerist, capitalistic world, consumer brands actually have not only the responsibility, but the ability to change a lot of that narrative. And so I fell in love. I fell in love with the idea of, in a world that is patriarchal and capitalistic, like what is my role in it? And do I try to be outside of the system and push it? Or does that not actually leave me with a lot of bargaining power and negotiating power? So maybe I do have to be in part of the business world and to enact that change very quickly. So started August, which is a period care brand, my junior year of college. Now we're at Target, we're online. And so it's been really exciting. But August as a consumer brand, what's been really exciting is we've been able to enact that change, right? I spent years trying to consult with, the brands out there to change themselves. But I think that it's been a lot faster for me to do it myself. So it's been super, super fun. And now I have 5 million followers on social media where I talk about the product and show my period blood, and somehow I haven't been banned yet, so that's great.
Well, if we can't fight the patriarchy with periods, I don't know what else is possible. Oh my gosh, I do. I love this. And Cristina, obviously culture, right, helps create the conditions of shifting policy, right? Do you want to talk about kind of how you have come to this work and your approach around period poverty?
Sure, and like Nadya, I also had anger driving me in the policy work. I served in the state legislature for 10 years. In my first year in office, I wanted to work on the tampon tax because it always pissed me off when I would go to the store that I had to pay a tax. What it was telling me is that my period was a luxury. And let me tell you that it has never felt like happy hour in my life. And my staff told me, you can't do that. That's suicide here. No one knows you. You weren't even supposed to win to begin with. You ran against the machine. And I believed them for a second. And 2 years later, I came into the office and I said, I don't care what you have to tell me anymore. I did not run for office to sit here and play the game like everyone else. I ran to be a change agent and to shake things up. And I'm angry about this. And I have such a privilege to have this opportunity to have a soapbox. I'm going to use it. And so I introduced the first bill in the nation to get rid of the tax on menstrual products, to get rid of the tax on my period, to make it clear that the budget is a reflection. Our state budget is a reflection of our values, and it was telling me that we did not value half the population that was born with the uterus, and I was going to change that. But when I started, I was called dumb. I had to hear stupid jokes like, it's going to be a bloody mess of a year. I would have women colleagues who were like, don't use the word tampon, like it was a bad word. I was like, what reality do I live in out there? But I continue to persevere, and for the last 8 years, I've been the period princess. Recently, I've wanted to trade in my title from period princess to menopause queen and talking about the whole reproductive cycle. Yes, ladies. You thought the period was bad, it gets worse later. I discovered the hard way. But whether it's our periods, whether it's menopause, ultimately women's health has been about having a baby, and that's it. And if you start to look at the research or the discussion, everything else is stigmatized or was not talked about. And so the work has led me to not only try to get rid of the tax on menstrual products, which we thankfully have done across many states because of a lot of young activists, but to also ensure that we have menstrual products in schools at all levels. The reality, you heard at the beginning, so many women, so many people born with the uterus don't have access. And so what does that mean? Stop, think about it for a minute. What does it mean when you don't have access to your tampon or to your pad or your cup? It means you're not part of society. It means you're making decisions that are not healthy for you. I had high school girls telling me that they skip school, that they use newspaper with socks, that they figured out where all the fancy hotels and restaurants were at because they usually had free products out there. This wasn't in another country. This was here in California out there. And so you're missing out on part of society. It's a struggle that you shouldn't have to have. And so California now ensures that 3rd grade through the university level, we have bathrooms and free menstrual products in half the bathrooms. And we kept it gender neutral because everyone that is born with the uterus doesn't necessarily identify as a woman. And so how do we also start to add those intersectionalities in our discussion out there? So I've been having fun talking about my period for a while. I will tell you culturally, when I started, my mom was like, you're such an embarrassment. But it's actually been great because it's also allowed for many more conversations that are intergenerational about things that my mom didn't talk to me about that I'm struggling with that maybe now we're talking about, and it's never too late out there.
No, I mean, that's my point. Like, I've literally never had a conversation with my mom, even in a house. And my first period, I literally had the pad that was still folded in thirds and wrapped in plastic like in my pants because I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do. So it speaks very directly to the need for sex education, right? And while we are watching all of these things, abortion bans, we're seeing these limits on IVF, we're seeing the impact on maternal care, sex education is also being taken away, right? What is the critical need that we need to see around sex education all the way from, I would say, menses to menopause? What is it that we need to understand or be doing better around sex ed? From a policy perspective, I'd say, yeah.
Education is power. And so at the end of the day, whether it's happening in the household or it's happening in our classrooms or it's happening through TikTok, it's important that it needs to happen. It needs to happen in an informed manner out there. And so we need to ensure that individuals have the power to understand their bodies and understand how to help themselves, understand how to ask for help along the way. But that onus then puts it all on us as individuals. What is the responsibility of our healthcare providers, of our research institutions, of other individuals to also be there for us when in that time of need? And I'll share one recent story. I went from getting my period regularly in a pattern and no cramps to getting my period every 2 weeks and having cramps year-round. And I went to the doctor and I was like, this isn't normal. I know myself, I'm almost 50, I know myself, this isn't normal. My first doctor told me, oh, I think it's just the fat pulling on your muscle that's causing that abdomen pain out there. So what that tells, yes, yeah, I was be angry for me because I was angry. I was like, you're fired. But it speaks to the education and the sex ed that needs to happen, not just to us as individuals and the empowerment that happens there, but to our healthcare providers, to researchers out there. I had to go through 4 different doctors to try to start to get some answers that I'm in perimenopause. I was like, oh, there's a word for that, thank you. And there's some solutions out there as well. And so we need to be doing a better job in empowering our students. As you see our rights being stripped away, it's about controlling us, whether it's Roe, yes, whether it's sex ed, and going back to the fact that all we're good for and it's making a baby. And don't get me wrong, making a baby is great. But we are multifaceted, and that's not the only thing we are out there. And so it's about ensuring that we get to be multifaceted along the way.
That's right. So we're in a room full of makers, right? How can businesses, especially for someone who started a business and who's in the middle of cultural and narrative change, how could businesses collaborate with the work that you are doing and thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that I learned very quickly, just dipping my toe in the water in the policy world, is that so much of policy shifts based on public opinion, right? We, change cultures so that we can change policy, right? Policy lawmakers can introduce legislation, but it doesn't get passed unless people are voting on it, and we've changed that idea. And I think that that's where business have the unique opportunity, where in this world, especially with period care, for example, this is still a commodity product, right? In places like Scotland, period products are free, but here you buy products, right? And when you go to the store, you have a couple, not too many options, but you have a few different options. These are businesses that have grown platforms, and I think platforms give us the ability and the responsibility to change culture. And so when we think about how do we support policy movement and systemic change, I think it goes into that world where businesses have the unique opportunity to mobilize, put their resources where it matters. As an example, something we've always done is cover the tampon tax for customers wherever possible. So when we launched online, we just didn't charge you the tampon tax wherever legally possible. Now we run a coalition where if you text us a picture of your receipt and you were charged a tampon tax, we'll Venmo it back to you within 24 hours, right? And that's something that the brand is covering.
That's smart.
But I think that's a really key example where businesses can put our money where our mouth is and say, like, this is ridiculous. We don't think you should be paying for this, because we're not owning that point of purchase. Like, we'll take advantage of it, but we're gonna make a lot of noise, and we're gonna support with our dollars, support with our platform to make that change. Sex ed is honestly, it is very terrifying what's happening to sex ed. As of last year in Florida, House Bill 1069 was passed, and it's nicknamed the Pronouns and Period Bill because it basically bans comprehensive education around periods before grade 9. But raise your hand if you got your period before 9th grade, right? And so I think that even with the personal story you shared, I hear that all the time of people saying, I got my period, I started bleeding, didn't even know what a period was, right? Thought I was bleeding, inside out. I didn't know where the tampon went, so I used it I hear like the hot dog where you like put the tampon just right between the lips, right? There's so much misinformation and questions out there, and there are health consequences when you use period products in an incorrect way. And I think that when we also look at sex ed, it's an opportunity to teach bodily autonomy.
Yes.
So studies show that it's directly linked to how we, mitigate sexual assault, how we advocate for consent, how we also be comfortable talking about periods so that you can ask for a period product if you need one, right? So I think that that's where businesses, as a brand that has a platform, when we can mobilize around policy to say, hey, House Bill 1069 and bills like it should not be being passed, but also, guess what? If schools aren't teaching it, if lawmakers are the one in places like Florida who are banning it, then who's teaching sex ed, right? Who has the platform? So yes, I do a lot of content around how to insert your tampon. Which hole does a tampon go into? Actually, some of my most viral videos are the ones that are just reminding people that we have 3 holes down there, not 2. And there are so many grown women who've had a baby who still say that I taught them through a video that pee and period blood come out of different holes, right? And the fact that you're learning about that as a grown person on TikTok shows
as a mother, as a new parent, exactly.
How broken the system is. And that's something where if schools let us down, if lawmakers let us down, we're still gonna hold them accountable. I hope that they change their ways. But in many ways, the responsibility then falls onto businesses, platforms, creators with platforms. And I think that that's a responsibility that I'm eager to take on, and I want other brands to take on as well.
Well, I am so excited for these sets of conversations and to have had them together, because what it shows is that we find leadership literally in everyday experiences, and it also shows us like the power, right, of our energy when we come together. When I was here 4 years ago, I also said, or 2 years, less than 2 years ago, after Dobbs, I also said that this fight was going to be the foundation for our next resistance. And we have seen it. We're seeing it in period poverty. We're seeing it in maternal care. We saw it in Kansas. We saw it in Kentucky. We saw it in Ohio. We're going to see it all the way throughout the next set of generations who are going to continue to fight for gender equity, fight for maternal care, fight for menstrual equity, and fight for reproductive freedom, which we are all here in this room going to do. So thank you, everybody, for all this incredible work.